hope you're doing great. My name is Mels. Today we're gonna be talking about the new Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette because nobody else has talked about it. So if you're interested, please remember to subscribe, it really helps out. But I just wanna jump into this straight, no chit chat, because I have a few things to say about this palette. Okay, so let's start off from the fact that nobody can discuss the Natasha Denona eyeshadow quality. It's not going to be much about the quality per se, knowing if this palette is good, because it is good. It's Natasha Denona. We know by now that her quality is good. We're gonna be talking about the overall color story and the diversity that you can find in this palette, because that's what I think it's basically one of the most criticisms I have, but it's also one of its strengths. So let's get into it. So let's start with these swatches. This eyeshadow have a new formula, which is a sparkly sheen finish. This is the first shade, it's called Stone. Then we have Whisper, which is a standard metallic shade, and it's like your everyday champagne shade. I will insert close-ups because I know that I can't really see a lot right now. Then we have the shade Hella, which is like a brownish taupey shade. We have Vague. This is one of the pinks in this palette. There are two, and I like that there are two because you don't only have to default to browns and taupes. This Travertine. Oh, this is such a nice shade. I haven't used it. It has like a brown base, but it has some sheen. It's actually quite similar to this, except this one is deeper. Delilah is one of those shades that everybody's talking about because it's really reflective. So I think it's one of these newest formulations. These type of new shades that she's come out with remind me of the eyeshadows in the Ethereal Eyes palette from Makeup by Mario. If you missed on that, this is the type of shade, the shimmery shades that were there. We have a standard brown, deep brown. This is the only deep shade in the palette. This is Silhouette. Yeah, it's not swatching great, but who cares about the swatches as long as this works, and this works on the eyes. Then we have Muse. This is like a very, very foiled shade. You can see here how reflective it is. I have some issues with this when they are so much foiled, and so it's like they are thicker in formula than the other ones. You can see it in the pen as well. It looks thicker. Sometimes it can give texture to your eyes, so you need to be careful when using this. The shade Fair is your base shade. It won't show up on my skin because it's it's fair. Then we have the shade Filigree, which is similar to Muse, a thicker, like creamier formula, and this also can give you texture. Wit is the other only rose shade in the palette, and this is a touch of coral, just a touch. Sheen is the other shade that seems like the Makeup by Mario formulation. It's very, very glimmery. Tender and Mesh are two transition shades. Wow, that did not swatch well. Okay, here it is. And then the last one, which is also a new formulation, it's Mia, and this is basically like the other shades, but it's icy pink. So here's a closer look at the swatches from the first shade in the first row, and then we go to the last shade, which is Mia. As you can see, the ones that stand out is this one, which is Muse. This one also is very, very thick, very, very pigmented, and that's Filigree. I also like how this one, Mia, is looking. It's very pretty, very princessy. Now that we have seen the swatches, let's start applying this. I will do two looks, and in the meanwhile, I will talk about what I think about this palette. Okay, I adjusted the lining a bit, so hopefully you can see better. Okay, so let's start with a nude-ish look. Well, of course, what else can you do? I will start by applying the shade Stone, which is this cool-toned brown here, and I'll use this as a transition. I like this shade a lot. I think that it's the perfect transition shade, and it's neutral more than cool tone. There is another one which is Mesh, which I feel like it's a bit more cooler toned than this one. So this is like the perfect shade to give dimension. It's like a natural contour for the eye. And as always, Natasha Denona formula is very easy to blend. I'm going over fair just to clean up the edges a bit and up the blending so that it's not as harsh. And by the way, I don't know why, like this part here of my lid, it never is very welcoming of eyeshadows, so it's very difficult for me to blend there. This happens with every formula, with every eyeshadow, so if you feel like there seems to be some skipping there, it's because my eyelid is weird. So now that I have applied that, I'm going into the shade Tender, which is basically the same shade but deeper, and I'm giving some dimension to the other corner. I will let you see how this shade Muse behaves on the eyelid. That's what I mentioned in the swatches. If you don't pick up, like, not too much, you will have some texture. So I am applying it by tapping it onto the lid instead of swiping. If you don't tap it, you may see that this just creates too much texture on the eyes. So this is the best way to apply this type of shade. And still, even if I am tapping, you can... Actually, I don't know if you can, but here on this line, it wants to just stick all in one place. So you need to be very careful with this shade, but the outcome is stunning. Like, this looks very foiled, very glimmery. I'm sure in a candlelight environment, this looks just bomb. I'm going into the shade Whisper, which is the metallic champagne shade, and just using this in the inner corner. Hopefully this isn't too dark for me, but yeah, it actually works. I was afraid it would have too much of a golden undertone for a pinpoint highlight, but it doesn't. I also want to use this just a tiny bit here under my brow. I'm using the deepest, the only one the palette has, and I'm creating some, like a line. This will be my eyeliner base, just to give it a smoky look. So I created a short with this palette. It's a 3 looks Natasha Denona I Need a Nude short, and yeah, it is like a fun video with some singing, like a lip syncing, how you would say. But the point is, if you see that short, you will notice that I am wearing 3 different looks, and I tried my best to make them different. But overall, they look very similar, and this is one of the key problems about this palette. It's that you don't have a lot of diversity with the looks. Unless you're going for, you know, that a pink color story or a brownish color story, of course they're gonna be different. But if you try different looks within these color stories, so within the brown, for example, which is the majority of the shades, you aren't gonna have such a different eye look than, I don't know, the day before. And I think that's actually what Natasha Denona wanted to do with this eyeshadow palette. I think her intention was creating an everyday eyeshadow palette. When you use something every day, you don't want to have to think about the shades you're using. You're probably using it before going to work, or, you know, something easy to use, which doesn't require too much thinking. And that's exactly what we got with this palette. I'm just using the same shades on my lower lid. And yeah, all the shades here work together very well. They blend one into the other. There are a few shades that are similar, and that's also a good thing. If you want this to be a creative palette, like something to experiment with, try different looks, I don't think this is the right palette for you, because no matter what you use, it's gonna be quite similar to what you've done the other day. But yeah, this is an issue, but it's also something that people want. I read a lot of comments about this, and people are saying that this is their new favorite go-to eyeshadow palette, and I agree, because it's so simple to use. You don't have to think a lot. it's basically done for you. No matter which shades you pick, it's going to be working and it's going to be pretty. But its forte isn't diversity. I don't even know if this works for deeper skin tones. If you happen to have a deeper skin tone than mine and you tried this, please let me know in the comments what you think about this palette. I'm very curious. As I mentioned in my other video, I haven't really watched any other first impressions or review because I wanted to go into this with my own thoughts. So this is the first look. I think this is very, very pretty, and I mean, you can see that this is such an high quality eyeshadow palette. And let's try something different for the other eye. I'm going into the pink shades. So I'm starting with the shade Wit, which is this almost coral leaning shade. It's definitely one of the warm tones in this palette. As you can see, it creates warmth. I would say this is mainly neutral with cool tones, except for this pink here. And yeah, I would say this is the only pop of warmth that Natasha Denona put in, surely because she wanted to give us the possibility of warming up any look. So that's done, easy transition. And then I'm going into Vague, which is the mauvey pink shade. This isn't really much of a intensity difference, just a tiny bit, as you can see, just a tiny bit. If you're going into these reviews and looks videos thinking that you will find a lot of different things, I don't think you will be happy because I don't think there's a lot to do. So I'm going into Mia, which is the Icy Pink new formula shade, and just putting this all over the lid. This is so pretty, but it looks a bit more white than pink on the eye, at least on me. Yeah, I guess it is a bit pink, but not so much, you know. And you can just stop here, and this would be a perfect everyday look, you know. 3 shades and you're done. I'm just going over the lash line, doing the same thing here. So these are the 2 looks. Ignore this spot here. I had some trouble with the eyeliner and to remove it, re-put my makeup on, and it's never been the same since then. And this is the easier eyeshadow look with the pinks. Let me know in the comments which one you prefer. So yeah, these are my thoughts about this palette. I've used it quite a lot this week, and not a great diversity, but a great everyday palette. And let's see a few comparisons with the Biba and the Glam palette now. Of course, I know the price point between these is very different, but as you can see, Biba looks more warm. Let me see if there are some shades that can overlap. I think maybe the shade Monroe from Biba. Here, it's this like warm rose gold. Can be a bit similar to Whisper, but I think Whisper is definitely cooler tones. You can see here the undertone. This is definitely more pink and this is more neutral. Then we have the shade Seed, which is the deepest brown in the Biba. This is Seed. And Silhouette, which is the deepest brown in the I Need a Nude. Doesn't swatch well, but you can definitely see the difference in the undertones. This is warmer and this is much cooler. The shade Buff from Biba and then Vague can seem similar in the pan. Again, Biba definitely warmer. And I think this is honestly all here. The other shades don't look similar at all. But let's try with the Glam, because when the Glam came out, it came out as the cool tone option from Natasha Denona, and actually there are quite a few warm shades. Now I know that it may be difficult to judge because this is a white background and this is a black background. So let's see if there are shades that can be compared. Let's try Blend from the Glam and Mesh from the I Need a Nude. This is Blend and this is Mesh. This is definitely as more yellow and more red. I think this is just warmer. Then we have the shades Outer Eyelid. I hate that this Glam palette doesn't really have shade names. This is the outer eyelid shade, and this is the shade Filigree. Actually, in this case, Filigree has a warmer tone than this one, and this one is from the Glam, this one is from the I Need a Nude. So this one is definitely warmer actually, because it has this brown base to it, dirtier and dirtier. Then this is the inner corner shade from Glam, and this is Muse from the I Need a Nude. The formula is definitely different. Oh, look here, look how much orange this Muse shade has, and this hasn't. So it still has a warm undertone, but this is a much deeper orange base, and this is from the I Need a Nude, and it's the shade I applied on this side. This is interesting. Muse is definitely more bright and more eye-catching though. Again, an outer eyelid shade from the Glam and Travertine from the I Need a Nude. The Glam one is definitely darker. They're nothing alike. This is also more beige. Let's try this crease shade and Stone. I think like this crease shade is the cooler tone here in the Glam. They are swatching better, but it's because my hand is wet because of the wipes. This is Glam and this is I Need a Nude. Different, very different. The silver in the Glam is a standard shimmer. This is a standard silver. And Delilah from the Nude palette, is the new formulation. Also very different tone. Again, this is a brown undertone, brown base. This is completely gray. So even though this looks silver on the eyes basically because of the amount of glitters here, it's definitely warmer than the one in the Glam. I'd say we're done with the comparisons. As you can see, there isn't really anything that overlaps, which is great because I think that this palette is covering an empty spot in the Natasha Denona collection. I really like this. I think I will use this in my everyday. It's meant to be for that. Let me know in the comments what you think about this. And yeah, thanks for watching. Hopefully you will subscribe because I love makeup and I love talking about makeup. And this is it for all, so I will see you in the next one. Take care, bye!